to steal food to survive while working in agriculture and food service. People told me stories of struggling to pay debts owed to their employer that only ever seemed to grow larger no matter how hard they worked. They described being forced to steal things to be used by their captors in other income-generating schemes. I learned that many of those in agriculture and factory work, especially in the clothing industry, were routinely underpaid or went entirely unpaid, both in the United States and abroad. Some companies would simply close and disappear rather than pay their employees. The problem of wage theft in the fashion industry is so prevalent that to combat it, California passed the Garment Worker Protection Act, which went into effect on January 1, 2022. I was forced to confront an unpleasant and astonishing reality. The price I pay for food and clothes may feel exorbitant, yet many of those who make it possible for me to eat are themselves working without pay. The people who make the clothes I wear may work in life-threatening conditions for less than even the paltry legal minimum wage supposedly enforced in their countries. What trafficking is? Trafficking is an extreme form of labor exploitation that involves fraud, force, or coercion. The most prevalent image of trafficking involves people being kidnapped and forced to work, particularly in the sex industry. In reality, most trafficking victims are lured into starting what may seem like a normal job. It's only after they have started work that they begin to encounter increasingly abusive conditions, including threats, violence, forced labor, and debt bondage. Juhu Thakral, founder of the American social impact consulting firm Apsara Projects and my co-founder of the Sex Workers Project, is an attorney who has represented many survivors and successfully advocated for policy change. She explained that a climate of fear must be present for a situation to be considered trafficking. Does the person understand some kind of harm will come to them or someone they care about if they do not acquiesce? Movement of persons is not necessary for a situation to be considered trafficking, but it can be a factor in certain cases, particularly those trafficking cases involving people who come to the United States from other countries. The end goal of all forms of forced labor is for the employer to get something for nothing or nearly nothing. Various forms of trafficking have allowed American employers to obtain labor for below market wages, or no wages, for hundreds of years. Most people who have been trafficked are vulnerable in specific ways. All but one of the hundreds of victims I have met were economically deprived. All had been physically abused, and some were literally beaten into submission. Many were threatened with death and told that their family members would be harmed if they did not do as they were told. Many had little education, and few knew their rights under the law. Features of exploitation. Force, fraud, and coercion are the hallmarks of contemporary human trafficking as defined by the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which I describe in Chapter 2. The phenomenon of compulsory labor has always existed, although it was not always labeled as trafficking, and some compulsory labor, as that of enslaved people and prisoners during the antebellum era, has been enforced by law. The tactics used by traffickers differ across workplaces and forms of exploitation. Some tactics overlap, while others are particular to a specific field. I have identified 21 tactics used by traffickers to control people and their labor. The easiest tactics to understand are threats and abuse, including verbal, physical, and sexual abuse and assault, and threats to others, including children and other family members. Manipulating financial accounts and imposing arbitrary fines can be forms of abusing worker contracts. Retaining the identity papers or travel documents of a worker can be a way to keep that worker physically confined or prevent them from leaving the country. Traffickers often keep the passports of immigrant workers. Historically, slavers prevented their enslaved people from traveling by withholding travel passes. Sometimes the law is used to maintain leverage over victims. Workers who have been forced to commit crimes, who have been arrested, or whose immigration status